guys, it's Smashley. Welcome back to my channel, or welcome if it's your first time. And if it's your first time, why don't you go ahead and hit that subscribe button. If you've been a subscriber for some time, then you probably are already aware of my love for Halloween. And if not, then you need to go ahead and check out my Halloween playlist. Back to the love of Halloween. I love the themes, the makeup, the movies, the costumes, all of the spooky season things count me in. I'm so stoked because once again, we are gonna be creating a Halloween installment on our high ceiling ledge in our living room. And the theme for this year, as the title has given it away, is Hocus Pocus! Now, Hocus Pocus is one of my all-time favorite classic spooky season movies. I was so elated to hear about Hocus Pocus 2 coming out. And fun fact, I'm originally from Rhode Island, and it is where they shot the movie. Moving on to the concept. So I'm gonna split the high ceiling ledge into two different scenes. The first scene is gonna be the Sanderson sister house. Iconic, inclusive of a DIY spell book, which of course we will be making for today's video. On the other side, we will recreate that night sky scene where you see kind of the shadows of the Sanderson sisters on their vessels in the sky, and there's the big moon, and we will be creating a night sky tapestry also in today's video. Let's go ahead and start with our spell book. So first things first, we need our book. Now, a little backstory. You guys know I love to thrift. I was totally intending on buying a really thick, real book, and I got super lucky at the thrift store because I found this guy. So take a look. It says $3.99, but it was white tag day, so I got lucky. It was 50% off. So this is the book we're gonna be using for today, and it's so cool. It's hollow, and it could not be a more perfect vessel for our spell book. Aside from that, you also need some snakes to put on the front, tissue paper, and paper towel to add texture with some Mod Podge. Also need some clay, air dry clay, an eyeball. Whoop, we've lost it. Eyeball for our book, some paint, some paintbrushes, and then a couple pieces of cardboard. So we got a lot to do. Let's jump right in. Okay. Starting off with the Model Magic air dry clay. This is gonna take probably the longest to dry, so we'll start here. I'm gonna be making the fingers for the bind of the book, and then the latch that's gonna go around the eye. So I just wanted to section off, and then we're pretty much just gonna make fingers. You wanna make sure that they are the right height. So kind of line them up. That looks about good. We can use this one as a measure. And of course, they absolutely do not need to be perfect. We're gonna paint over them and kind of want to give them the creepy looking feeling anyway. Okay, from here, I'm just gonna flatten them out. Since they're gonna be up against the spine, I kind of want them to be flat on one side to make it easier for gluing. Next, I'm gonna use a little toothpick, and we're gonna make the nail and then some of the ridges for the knuckle. Okay, and I'm kind of gonna follow my own hand to get the details. So, all said and done, you should be left with something that looks like that.
Next up, it's time to work on the latch for the book. I went ahead and took that eyeball off camera and just cut it in half. So using the flat side, I went ahead and used that to cut out the center. The eyeball is going to sit in the middle of the latch, so it serves as a really good measure. For the part of the latch that goes on the opening of the book, I went and just created this small rectangular piece. And again, does not have to be perfect. Lastly, to finish off the top of the latch, we just added one more piece on the top of it, and that's going to connect to the rectangular part of the latch as well. Then using that same toothpick, we're going to head and just add the pattern into the latch itself. I like to do this, of course, before drying to just make sure that the pattern holds up over time. I was getting so excited while doing this because you can finally start to see a little bit of the vision. So the eyeball I had on hand had a red iris. We need to go ahead and change that to green so it matches that of the book. So I just grabbed some acrylic paint, Mixed a color that I thought would be pretty close, and we just went to town on painting over that iris. I did let the paint dry in between coats because I noticed after the first one it was definitely going to need a second coat. And then I really just used the paint to build up the depth in the iris with the green. And I really love the way that it turned out. Finally time to begin transforming the book. I looked at approximately 1 million photos of this book before putting the design together, and I noticed underneath the snakes there was sort of this little bit of a raised platform, not anything too thick, but I figured a piece of cardboard would be the perfect fit. So I'm just going to go ahead and cut out a few different pieces, one for the bind for the book that's going to sit right underneath that larger snake, and then I'll also do 2 for each of the corners of the book for the smaller snakes. Now, the snakes that I use for the corner are not exact. I truly thought that these were small rubbery snakes when I bought them, and when I opened the package, I realized that they were hard and you could not move them out of the shape that they came in. So totally fine, we ran with the punches. I left them the shape as is, and I kind of just picked one that I thought was similar, and truly at the end, you can't even tell. So work with what you have. To create that leathery, worn out texture of the book, we are going to be adding layers of tissue paper using Mod Podge to apply in between and underneath. Adding on the layers of tissue paper was definitely one of my favorite parts about making this book. It was so therapeutic. The best part is that you can be as messy or as clean as you'd like. Because I wanted to have real organic texture, you'll see me kind of just work in the pieces of tissue. I will say for this book, I really only focused on the sides, meaning the binds, and then the top of the book. You totally could do the back portion of it, but for me, I was going to have it up on a mantle or on a podium, and I didn't really feel the need to work on the back of it. But essentially, if you would just do and replicate everything we did on the front, also on the back. Since I already had a good idea of where I was going to lie down those cardboard pieces for the snakes to sit on top of, I really began to focus the tissue paper on the center of the book, where it wouldn't be covered by those pieces. For the parts of the book that were raised, where it looks like it almost has like staples or it was sewn up, I decided to take smaller pieces of tissue paper and kind of crumple them up a little bit, raise them up a little, and then use the Mod Podge to really build that up. I wanted to give some sort of a ridge so that I could later go back and add either the staples or the string or whatever you want to use. Once you have all the tissue paper down and the texture looks good and to your liking, we can move on to adding the cardboard pieces. So I just applied them with some hot glue, and then to keep the texture consistent of the book, I decided to go over the cardboard pieces with tissue paper as well. I used hot glue gun to go ahead and add the snakes on top of the cardboard pieces as well. I will say that larger rubbery snake gave me some trouble with the hot glue gun, so I ended up using some regular super glue for that larger snake instead. Be very careful. To wrap up the texturizing of this book, I wanted to work on the eye last, so I just use it as a measure. There is some leathery texture kind of built up around the eye, and it almost looks like it's an eyelid. So I really wanted to use a tissue paper and build it up around the eyeball to kind of give that same illusion. Once you've gone ahead and created the crater for your eyeball, you can go ahead and use hot glue gun to apply that as well. And then to just make it completely seamless, add your final touches of tissue paper right around it. Lastly, for the eyelid itself, I did choose to use a piece of paper towel. It was a bit thicker, and I wanted to have the eyelid kind of raised off of the eye, and I figured it would take too many layers of the tissue paper to achieve that look. If you guys also wanted to use paper towel to texturize the book, that totally works as well. Fresh out of the air dryer, it was time to pull out our fingers and latch for our book. They felt pretty dry, so I will say that the air fryer was a success. Again, I did at 200 degrees and I left them in there for a couple of hours while I worked on the rest of the book, and they came out great. To apply them to the book, I went ahead and just used the same hot glue gun, and it worked like a charm. I started to get really excited when I added the latch over the eye. I was so ready to paint it at this point. Using a mixture of both brown and black, I messed around with the color a little bit and wanted it to represent that old, worn out, leathery look. So I mixed these two and it worked out great. I focused that brown color really on the center, on the bind with the fingers, and also underneath the eye and for the eyelid. I wanted to use a different color for underneath the snake, so I made sure to kind of just avoid that as best as I could. The eye is where it got a little messy, and in retrospect, I probably could have waited to glue on that latch since I was going to paint it a different color anyway, but honestly, you roll with the punches and it turned out fine in the end. To just start off with a base color, I decided to paint the snakes and the cardboard piece underneath them black to begin with. I really wanted it to have this like shadowy depth before we went over it with the silver. I wanted to use that same black color to also add depth to the wrinkles in the book. I think it was going to be something that would make it pop and give it more of that 3D effect. So loved the way that this came together. For the latch, I decided to start off with just a silver to see how the color will hold up, but you guys will see me paint over this later and get it to match the snakes. Going back to the snakes, I went and added the silver with the dry brush technique. All it means is exactly that. Instead of dipping your paintbrush in water, you keep it dry and then you're dipping it into the color and kind of just swiping it on. It ended up giving it this really cool brushed metal look. Once I had all of the snakes painted the way that I wanted them, that's really when the latch started to stick out to me in a funny way, and that's when I decided to deepen that color up a little bit to get it to match the others. Whether you do the black as a foundation or the black after the silver, it kind of ended up giving the same color. So I guess you could do either or. Now I did score a little hole in the latch earlier on in the video, and that was to leave room for this tiny little gem. It is a gold gem, but I only had a purple one on hand, so I went ahead and just mixed the color to paint over it. When I was putting together the design for the book, one of the hardest things for me was figuring out what I was going to do for the staples or the sewn on string over the wrinkles in the book. And ultimately, I just landed on paint. I created this fleshy tone color and it worked great. I took one of the smallest paintbrushes I had and I used that to hand paint on each of the stitches. I cannot wait for you guys to see how this turned out.
For this side of the wall, we wanted to give it a Sanderson Sisters house vibe. So it had some brown sheets that I had available, and I was able to put those up using a staple gun. I got this creepy cloth from the dollar store. We actually got a few different colors. We got black, gray, and like a brown. So I just kind of mixed them in as much as I can. In order to get a vibe, we looked for some old, worn out, creepy looking things. We grabbed this broom, which is really cool looking, and we hung it up. So we grabbed a book stand, and honestly, it is perfect for this theme. Absolutely perfect. We found the bird cage that we ended up spray painting black. We found some dirty pots that look really bad, but fit perfect. So I actually made this little shelf so we could put our skulls, books, and any potions that we had. Yeah, you know, the witch essentials. You can't have a creepy house without some skeletons, of course. To finish it off, we had some candles we wanted to put up. To make it more magical looking, we found some flameless candles, so we decided to hang them up with fish string so it made it look like it was floating in here.
Beatles, find something, anything, we must fly!
Winnie! My broom isn't misbehaving! Uh-oh! Winnie!
For the other side of the wall, I wanted to recreate the Hocus Pocus 2 movie poster, but with a little bit of a 3D feel. So I just went to a local thrift shop and picked up this bed sheet that I could work on. So using said piece of cardboard, I just went ahead and traced the circle for the moon around it, so I knew where I needed to focus my paint. I got really lucky with finding a gray sheet, so Instead of spray painting 2 different colors to create depth, I really just had to go over it with the yellow and spray paint in a way where it created some natural craters, like the craters on the moon. And in order to create the purple to midnight blue ombre sky, I wanted to do a reverse paint technique. So I took that piece of cardboard back on top of the moon that I just finished spray painting, held it down with a few different spray cans so that the yellow would remain, and then I could paint everything over it and we would be left with the perfect moon shape. For the bottom part of the ombre sky, I wanted to use this really pretty purple, and on top we went with a midnight blue. When laying down those layers of spray paint, I really did focus around that cardboard area to really define that shape of the moon. That's where I wanted it to be the absolute darkest, and from there, I kind of just faded the paint out. This really went by so much faster than I thought it would, and it was also extremely easy to do. I've seen this sort of technique used in street art, and I've been dying to try myself. I thought I would be trying on a much smaller scale, but leave it to me to create this giant tapestry. Highly recommend, you guys. This turned out beautifully. I mean, come on, just look at this reveal. Next, we're going to make the stencils for the Sanderson sisters. And pretty much all I did was find a silhouette of them online. I printed 1 Sanderson sister per page so that I could get them as big as I wanted before I cut them out. Once I cut from the printer paper to use as a stencil, I taped them to a piece of cardstock and I cut around it so that I could be left with their silhouette. I used the scissors as much as I could, but all in all, using the X-Acto knife, I was really able to get those precision cuts I was looking for to keep the integrity of the Sanderson sisters' silhouettes. At the bottom of the promo poster for the second movie, there's all these dark shadows of branches. So instead of painting some shadows on the actual tapestry itself, I decided to take some branches from outside, again to give it that 3D effect, and we just went ahead and spray painted them black.
Now we can hang up our Sanderson sisters. But before we do that, we have to set up our background first. I use a staple gun because it's the easiest thing to hang it up with. So we decided to use fish string to hang up our sisters, only because you can't really see it when you hang it up, which is great. We're also going to need some weights or something heavy to hold down the string so it doesn't move so much. We happen to have a double-sided sticky gel type thing. I don't know where we got it from, but it worked great, so we ended up using that. On the silhouette, I had placed 1 on top and 2 at the bottom. The reason why we put 2 at the bottom is because we're going to add a second fish string. As you can see, if I don't add a second string to it, it starts to rotate and it doesn't look good. It took some trial and error, but we ended up getting it the way we want it. Figured out that the further out the strings are, the bigger the shadow will be. Now that we have our sisters hanging, we can go ahead and start to add our spray painted branches. I placed 2 around the moon, the rest I spread it out throughout the tapestry.
Twist the bones and bend the back. Hit it to cover to America Mystic. Trim him of his baby fat. Hit it to cover to America Mystic. Give him fur black as black, just like this.
I will be the first to admit that this project was a little overzealous, but absolutely worth it in the end. I love the way everything turned out. I can't wait to recreate this space for future Halloweens. If you guys liked today's video, please let me know in the comment section which was your favorite part. And as always, make sure you like, subscribe, and we will catch you guys in the next one.
Sister!